Welcome. Thank you for tuning in to the candidate debates for AS elections. In these times with lots of question marks, we hope that this will provide you some normalcy and wherever you may be viewing this from. This allows you to stay connected to your SDSU family. We are scheduled for debates today for the candidates for AS External Vice President of Financial Affairs, Executive Vice President, and President. We thank all candidates for AS leadership for the effort and time they put into their campaigns. We also like to thank the Daily Aztec for being able here to moderate these debates. Voting in AS elections starts Monday, March 23rd at 8 a.m. and ends on Thursday, March 26th at 7 p.m. As usual, all voting will take place on SDSU web portal. Just log in and click on the AS elections tab anytime during the election period. SDSU continues to monitor the evolving situation with COVID-19, and we encourage you all to please visit sdsu.edu/COVID-19 for all the latest information. If you have any questions or concerns that we as at AS can help assist with, please feel free to contact us through the AS Your Voice Matters. Additionally, if any students are in a financial or other crisis at this time, please contact the Economic Crisis Response Team, also known as ECRT. They are able to assist students virtually at this time. Just go to sdsu.edu/ECRT. Take care. Everybody, please stay safe. And just know that we are here for you, and we're here for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Day 2 of the 2020 AS debates. My name is Bella Ross, Editor-in-Chief for the Daily Aztec, and this is Jack Malmud, the live producer. We are here today to talk to the candidates for Vice President of Financial Affairs, Executive Vice President, and the candidates for AS President about their visions for SDSU and how they plan to fill these roles.
After each question we ask, we will give each candidate 1 minute to respond. All candidates will be asked the same questions, and each candidate will be allowed 3 rebuttals throughout the debate, which will be limited to 30 seconds.
We will also be keeping track of the candidates' times during their responses. We will hold up a 30-second, 10-second, or stop sign when applicable during their responses.
Given the current situation with the coronavirus, there is no audience at today's debate. If anybody watching online has a question they want to ask the candidates, we encourage you to comment questions on our broadcast for consideration. We will select a few questions at the end if there is enough time.
To finish up, each candidate will be allowed 1 minute for a closing argument for final thoughts. Can we have the candidates for VP of Financial Affairs at the stage? Before we begin, do either of you have any questions about the rules?
No.
Well, let us begin with opening statements. And again, this is the candidates for Vice President of Financial Affairs. You guys each get 1 minute, and we can start over here.
Okay. Hello, everyone. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you all for streaming in today. I acknowledge that this is a time in which we face many stresses and unknowns that affect every aspect of our life, and I acknowledge that before we continue with this debate period. I really want to say this responsibility that this election has as a recovery as a university is crucial moving forward. I'd like to thank the Daily Aztec and the Student Union staff for putting this event together. My name is Victor Panera, and I'm running to be your next Vice President of Financial Affairs. I'm a third year majoring in finance, pursuing a minor in public policy economics, and I believe that through my background in finance and my servant leadership, I have developed the proper skills to execute this position to the highest degree. As Chief Financial Officer, I pride myself on the student-oriented mindset, increasing financial transparency, and performing in a way that is intentional in all financial operations. Today, I strive to emphasize the cultural, Greek, and philanthropic-based organizational leaders that help make my 2020 vision move forward into a positive direction.
Hello, I'm David Gamble, and I'm running to be your Vice President of Financial Affairs. I'd like to start off by acknowledging we are on Kumeyaay land. Furthermore, I'd like to thank the Daily Aztec for allowing this platform for us to speak our voice, as well as all the faculty who have made this nice space possible. Furthermore, I'd like to thank all my family and friends who have given me this opportunity and inspired me to be the leader that I am. And to all the viewers, thank you for watching. I know we're all going through chaotic times, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. Being the CFO of a $28 million organization is not a responsibility I take lightly. With that, I'd like to reevaluate how Associated Students allocates their funds to get more funds into your organization's pockets. Furthermore, I'd like to redefine financial transparency between students administration, and housing. And I'd like to reinforce the resources that we have on campus, such as the Economic Crisis and Response Team and the on-campus food pantry. Allow me to prioritize people over profit, and allow me to serve SDSU.
Moving on to our first question. To address the obvious, we are currently running this debate with no audience as students watch from home and engage in all of their classes virtually. In light of everything that is happening with the spread of the coronavirus, why is it important for students to tune in and participate in the Associated Students elections? And do you think pressing on with the elections would put people in danger?
Yeah, this is a great question, especially since it's affecting all of us right now. I believe it is important for all students to be able to engage with their Associated Students officers and their executive officers, which is why I believe it's important for us to continue with these elections. As already mentioned, we'd like to provide a sense of normalcy for all of those who had to leave just yesterday or in the days before or in the upcoming days. Furthermore, we'd like to emphasize that we are here to serve you in any way that we need, any way that you need. And I would like us to be an available resource in order to ease the transition for those of you who are moving home and when we come back to kick off the next year.
I think it's extremely pivotal. We're in an extremely pivotal time right now to move into a forward direction as a campus. And I think by continuing with these elections, it does present another state of normalcy. Because throughout this chaotic time, I think students need people they can confide in. And moving forward, I think when students return next fall, it is up to us as AS executives to really emphasize that we have resources on campus like the Economic Crisis Response Team, the food pantry that is here for students to use as resources, which is why I believe that moving forward, having these AS elections, it really helps us regain our identity as a campus and return back to normal. Thank you.
Beginning with you this time, define the role of the Vice President of Financial Affairs, and how do you plan to make this role your own?
As Chief Financial Officer, I act as the Chair of the Financial Affairs Committee and serve as the direct liaison between the Financial Affairs Committee and the AS Board of Directors. I also sit on multiple college councils and committees, along with overseeing the AS annual budget. I think most importantly, though, I do act as an advocate for students facing financial literacy, food insecurity, and housing insecurity, especially through Aztec's Rock Hunger, which is AS's biggest campaign, in which we unite the entire campus community in battling one fight against food insecurity. Thank you.
Essentially, the role of Executive Vice President of Financial Affairs is to be the overall CFO of Associated Students. With that, we have over a $30 million operating budget. I would like to use this position to help students. I have faced financial pressures. Coming from a single mother household, I understand what it's like to experience those financial pressures and have to prioritize finances over my individual success. This position would allow me to sit on the Financial Affairs Committee, allocating funds to your organizations. Furthermore, it allows me to be a liaison between the individual student and the overall $30+ million operating budget, so I can make these funds accessible to you.
For the purpose of the audience back home, we would like to ask both candidates to speak closer to the mic if possible. Thank you. Of course. Why did you decide to run for this position? What makes you the most qualified person for the job?
I decided to run for this position for many reasons. Personally, I have faced financial pressures and financial insecurity. I'm an out-of-state student, so I'm paying the full tuition here. Furthermore, it's just me and my mom at home. So I understand what it's like to not always have the resources and the support that you need. However, I've been involved in Associated Students and other organizations for a long period of time. As a first year here, I was part of the first year leadership experience program where my mentor was Christian Onwuka, who was serving as Vice President of Financial Affairs at the time. Furthermore, I'm a student at large on the Financial Affairs Committee right now, as well as been on the Aztec's Rock Hunger leadership team for the past 2 years, serving in different positions. I'm also the campus community commissioner, I'm the campus community representative, working on different things such as campus safety and community relations, which has allowed me to gain a holistic perspective of what it is to be a student.
I decided to run for this position for two big reasons. The biggest reason is I want to set precedent for future generations of students who want to be involved in student government. The second reason being, coming where I'm from, financial literacy is extremely prevalent, and I've always been told since a young age it's about using your platform to impact not only your friends and family, but also those around you, which is why I intend as Chief Financial Officer to make an impact on the 35,000 students we have on our campus. Through my involvements on campus, such as Road to Active SCSU, which promotes service above self, along with my executive position on Tijuana Home Build, I have really understood what it means to get out there into the campus community and really unite campus communities into fighting one goal. In terms of Tijuana Home Build, it was to unite campus communities into serving a family in need. I also have been prepped and grown into the finance realm, and I believe that through my experience in both finance and service, I plan on making these two ideas coexist within one position.
All right. This year's alternative consultation process successfully ushered in the development of 2 new campus fees to support increased psychological services and identity centers on campus. However, both of these initiatives were only narrowly approved by students. How do you plan on creating significant tangible change on campus without imposing additional fees? And we can start with you.
So the difficult thing about this is that these are resources that students definitely need. But just frankly, students shouldn't have to pay for them. They did bring in new cultural centers. They did instill a new 24/7 crisis hotline along with more health and wellness employees. But I feel like before we go to its students paying for more, we have to exhaust all lobbying efforts, exhaust PBAC committee, exhaust AS unallocated funds. Because although these are definitely resources we need, the last option should be students paying for them. Thank you.
Will you repeat the question one more time?
It's lengthy, but I definitely will. This year's alternative consultation process successfully ushered in the development of 2 new campus fees to support increased psychological services and identity centers on campus. However, both of these initiatives were only narrowly adopted by students, or narrowly approved. How do you plan on creating significant tangible change on campus without imposing additional fees?
Great question. I love that SCSU has the opportunity to provide students with so many resources. However, it's unfortunate that it's the burden of students to pay for them. Associated Students has many unallocated funds, and I want to make them more accessible to the individual so that we are able to use resources and fund more resources, such as the Economic Crisis and Response Team and the on-campus food pantry to make things more accessible. In regards to the resource centers that were just implemented, as well as the mental health fee, I'm happy that students have more accessibility and more of an identity on this campus. However, I'd like to work with my Vice President of External Relations in order to be able to lobby at the Capitol, for us to be able to get the funds that we need so students feel supported without having to pay for their own support.
What do you see as the most pressing financial challenges facing SDSU currently, and how do you plan to address these challenges?
I believe the most stressful financial problem that SDSU is facing is the overall financial transparency between administration and students. As you just mentioned, we had a new fee where students have to pay for their own resources, as well as different initiatives such as the Sophomore Success have made more money come out of the individual students' pockets. However, most students don't exactly know where their money is going and just feel that SCSU is trying to take money from them. They don't understand why money goes into reserves and other things of that nature. I would like to make financial transparency my biggest initiative in this position. With that, I'd like to work with administration in order to break down their budgets and actually be able to present documentation to the students to show you where your money is going.
I think currently the most pressing issue we face is the COVID-19 pandemic, and I feel like although it is a short term, it will have long-term effects on us, considering that AS auxiliaries such as the Mission Bay Aquatic Center, Children's Center, and the Student Union are all non-operating. And we will definitely have a cutback in profits this upcoming year due to that. So now, where I would like to emphasize that is our nation's economy is also taking a hit on this, and I feel like that would definitely affect students entering the professional fields after, which is why through the Economic Crisis Response Team, I plan on emphasizing the Financial Literacy Peer Program, because I think it's pivotal that students understand how to balance their finances moving forward from this, along with the lack of transparency. And I think that just really, it's really just me being a really prevalent presence on campus in terms of attending AS Banking's training sessions at the beginning of the year, along with maintaining that connection with students throughout the course of the year so they understand the importance of maximizing AS funding.
This year was the first term SCSU fully implemented the Sophomore Success Initiative, requiring all non-local sophomores to live on campus for 2 years. The move was highly unpopular with students, many of whom referred to the decision as a quote-unquote money grab. How do you balance the desires of the students against those of the university when it comes to unpopular programs like this? Starting with you.
I think we definitely have to put students first, because at the end of the day, I can relate with students. It's hard to pay for these things such as on-campus living because a lot of us face financial stress. So when I go into these meetings with the Financial Affairs Committee or with anything having to do with our budget, I will go in with a student-oriented mindset because I feel at the end of the day, students are the ones, and we are the ones where everything is about. And I think it's through me where I can be a voice for students and show them that, at the end of the day, this is our school, and if we want something to happen, we should definitely have a voice in it. Thank you.
I really appreciate this question. Last year on the Campus Community Commission, we were actually dealing with the Sophomore Success Initiative and all the student feedback. With that, we had taken a lot of surveys and understood how the students were feeling, and then had presented that to administration with no follow-up. I intend to go into the Office of Housing Administration and tell them what the students want, what we want, and what we need. Because I'm not always going to be the happiest with administration, because I will be advocating for the students. The Sophomore Success Program did not take into account their ideas. It did not take into account their individual problems, their struggles, what they needed. With that, I'd like to focus on multiple different aspects of it, increasing financial transparency. I'd like to focus on how Greek housing was affected to be able to get some people out of the program if need be and they can't afford it. Also, maybe providing scholarships and other funds for people to actually be able to pay for the second year fee.
Just to add on to that, I think what I would do to ensure that students have a voice is work closely with my Vice President of University Affairs in the Your Voice Matter campaign in terms of allowing students to truly voice their opinions so that administration knows where we're coming from. Thank you.
With all the different identity center and resource centers opening on campus, how do you plan to continue balancing different student voices and keep diversity a priority?
Diversity has always been a priority at San Diego State, and it shall always remain that way. Let's make that clear. It is one of Associated Students' values, and it is one of my values. I'm happy that these new identity centers are able to give different students that feeling and support of home on this campus, even if home is not here or family is far away. I would like to work with these cultural organizations in order to provide them more funding for them to be able to have programs to support their individual communities, and also to work with other communities in order to be able to share their culture. One thing about diversity is that we all are diverse people and come from diverse backgrounds, but sharing our individual stories and our individual diversity and intersectionality is what makes us a community and what can make SDSU home.
I believe that diversity is a huge thing about what makes SDSU SDSU. I think when we come to this campus, the beautiful thing about SDSU is we are members from all walks of life who unite as one SDSU community. In terms of increasing diversity, I would work with my student diversity commissioner in terms of creating those discussions, creating those focus groups, along with ensuring that these diverse communities maintain that budget that they have to ensure that they have the proper resources, such as the Aztec Culture Project. This past year, AS allocated $200,000 for the Campus Healing Program. Campus Healing Garden, I apologize. And I feel like that is extremely pivotal moving forward, is to ensure that these resources or these communities have the resources to ensure that we acknowledge them and their history.
All right, we're going to be moving into questions from viewers online. First, Aztec's Rock Hunger is a primary campaign project for the VP Financial Officers. However, this campaign ends in the fall. What other initiatives do you plan to implement as VP of Finance outside of Aztec's Rock Hunger?
So Aztec's Rock Hunger is definitely a pivotal campaign for Associated Students in the San Diego State community, as it does affect 450,000 San Diegans on top of 164,000 children. But what I would want to do is I want to work past Aztec's Rock Hunger, especially with the current crisis that we are facing. I will look for new alternatives to exploring increased percentage going to the Economic Crisis Response Team. Aztec's Rock Hunger, 80% goes to the Jacob and Cushman San Diego Food Drive. But I think given the situation we have, we must address not only the needs of our students, but also the greater San Diego community, and we can address the needs of our students by exploring new ways to increase Economic Crisis Response Team funding to ensure that students' needs and basic needs will always be fulfilled. Thank you.
As someone who's served on Aztec's Rock Hunger for the past 2 years, I understand the importance of this campaign and how many individuals it truly impacts. I'm happy to have served on this campaign and supported not only the San Diego State community, but the overall San Diego community. One thing I'd like to improve on this campaign is the overall recognition of the organizations that have supported us, but furthermore acknowledging that food insecurity is not a three-week experience through the year. It's some people, it's been years that they've been facing this, which is why I'd like to reinforce the overall on-campus food pantry in order to provide some temporary support for those who need it. Furthermore, I'd like to allocate more funding to the Economic Crisis and Response Team so that they have a long-term support. I'd like to work with the Jacobson Cushman Food Bank of San Diego in order to implement further policies on our campus that allows students to feel supported through the entirety of the year.
Many RSOs are simply unaware of the funds available to them through AS. What detailed plan do you have for outreach to these organizations and making sure the banking process is as straightforward as possible? We'll start with you.
With over $100,000 available for campus funding and campus programs, I'd like to promote that through multiple ways. First off, I'd like to make the criteria in order to be able to apply for this funding simpler. I'd like organizations to be able to come into the Financial Affairs Committee or the Campus Program Funding Committee in order to be able to say that, hey, I need these funds in order to support philanthropy or other things of that nature, and actually be able to get them. I want them to know that I have confidence in them and their organization and that they are welcome here.
I think it's a huge issue that we have these allocated funds for AS organizations or for recognized student organizations that go untouched. This past year, 2018-2019 school year, there was close to $60,000 that went untouched. I think that's definitely a problem. And that starts with this position, I feel. I feel like as the Vice President of Financial Affairs, it is up to me to really be a presence in campus life because not everyone understands the whole process. Now, what can I do using my background in finance to make that a lot more easier for people to attain? Along with the campus program funding, only 45 RSOs used it last year. What can we do to increase that number? And I think that all comes down to presence. I think we give them these resources. It's very informational, but it's about time we become proactive about it in terms of going out to these organizations through the AS banking trainings in which we have multiple leaders from these organizations together and showing that I will be an advocate for them and a liaison between their organization and AS banking and funding on our campus.
Another thing that I'd like to do is to implement a marketing program with my Vice President of University Affairs. I think one thing that has been set as a precedent of this position is just to stand there and look at numbers and just try to allocate funds. But it's not often that the Vice President of Financial Affairs goes out into the community and asks people what they need or how we can support them. I'd like to create a marketing plan to give to all RSOs or developing organizations so they know about the funds, know how to apply, and centralize all of these funds.
Thank you. We are now moving into closing statements. You get 1 minute each, and we can start with you.
Thank you again to the Daily Aztec for hosting this platform in order for us to be able to speak our voice. I very much appreciate it. Furthermore, I'd like to thank my opponent for a great debate, and I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to watch this during this chaotic time in our lives. I appreciate you allowing us to represent you and you acknowledging who will be representing you. I'd like to reevaluate, redefine, and reinforce SDSU. I understand financial pressure. As an out-of-state student raised in a single-parent household, I understand what it's like to not always feel supported. That's why I'm confident that myself and my team are ready, willing, and qualified to serve SDSU.
I'd first like to start off by thanking all of you streaming in today. Thank you to the Daily Aztec, thank you to my opponent for a great debate. I really want to emphasize the fact here that my team is comprised of cultural, Greek, and philanthropic-based organizational leaders that really give us clarity and a holistic view on campus life, which really just leads to a dynamic perspective into a forward direction as a student body. And I believe that with my background as a first-generation student in college, as my background facing financial literacy growing up, I can use my platform to not only serve my friends and family, but also my entire campus community. And I just want to thank you, everyone, for streaming in today. And through this role, I will implement my dynamic perspective, forward direction, and 2020 vision. Thank you.
Thank you to both the candidates. I will now call up the candidates for Executive Vice President. Thank you both for being here today. We will begin with opening statements, and we can start with Ubaldo.
Buenas tardes. My name is Ubaldo Martinez, and I'm running to be your next Executive Vice President. First and foremost, I want to thank the Daily Aztec for hosting this debate. I want to thank my opponent here for being here today. And secondly, I want to thank the union and AS staff for making this event possible. Issues we face here at San Diego State University, including accessibility to mental health resources, making sustainability a priority to administration, and the gap between cross-campus collaboration. It is because of these issues that I decided to do something, to run, to serve SDSU.
Hello, everyone. I would first like to thank you all for streaming in today. I do realize that this is a time of hardship, not only in our academic lives, but our personal lives as well. I thank you for understanding the importance of this election and the responsibility it has for rebuilding the students' needs at the remainder of this online semester. My name is Bella Martellino. I'm a second-year biology major pursuing a minor in cultural proficiency, and I am running to be your next Executive Vice President. Because of my experience representing communities both inside and outside of associated students, I do understand the barriers and the limitations that keep us from becoming a unified SDSU community. As your Chief Operating Officer, I'll not only work to build unifying bridges, but lay the foundation for continuous collaboration between our different campus communities. Thank you.
We are in the midst of a global pandemic that is affecting college campuses nationwide. If you were in the Executive Vice President role today, how would you address the concerns of students and keep them engaged with their university as we enter a virtual platform? Start with you.
So with our country facing the COVID outbreak currently, students at SDSU are no longer allowed to be on campus, whether that be before classes or most recently housing. The current life of campus life and campus pride is at a standstill. As Executive Vice President, I would be in charge of campus life and campus pride, and during this time, with it being stopped at the moment, I would realize the resources that we could give to students who don't have access to online classes, computers, and utilize other chairs and opportunities to place leaders into initiatives in these positions and make sure that all student voices are continuing to be heard.
Can you repeat the question for me, please?
Yeah. We are in the midst of a global pandemic that is affecting college campuses nationwide. If you were in the Executive Vice President role today, how would you address the concerns of students and keep them engaged with the university as we enter a virtual platform?
Thanks. Very, very applicable to the situation. So first and foremost, we need to address that students' health is a priority, and I think that making sure that is the first thing that we have in mind is most important. But then the second thing is making sure that we're still offering them a quality education. At the end of the day, students come to San Diego State to learn and then take advantage of the opportunities second. So making sure that they are in the decision-making process moving forward, and also in the decision-making process for next year. Obviously, a lot of things have been cut short, so making sure that these decisions aren't just being made by administration, but still listening to the student voice, having ways for students to directly communicate with decision makers, I think is what we should be doing. Thank you.
And starting with Ubaldo for this one, what does it mean to be the AS Executive Vice President, and how do you plan to make this role your own?
Thank you. So the role of Executive Vice President is to be the direct liaison between students and associated students, to oversee Campus Life Council, to sit on the Greenfest Executive Board, and to oversee Homecoming. I've had experience with all three of those, and I really plan to make this my own by reevaluating what it means for mental health to be a priority. I think we expect students to be involved, but first and foremost, we got to make sure that they are capable of being involved. We should reinforce SDSU pride, enhancing cross-campus collaboration, and making sure that we are creating opportunities for all communities on campus, especially marginalized communities. And then thirdly, by redefining sustainability, I really plan on moving towards making SDSU carbon neutral by 2030 and the implementation of a Chief Sustainability Officer in the President's office. Thank you.
As Executive Vice President, I will be the voice between students and administration. My responsibilities will include serving as designated member of all boards, commissions, councils, and committees of AS, as well as chairing the Homecoming Steering Committee and the Campus Life Council. In these positions, I will be collaborating with these respective groups to guarantee effective coordination and execution of their programming. Essentially, the Chief Operating Officer is in charge of establishing campus life and campus pride. I aim to strive for inclusive excellence by bridging the gap between differing groups on campus, connecting with leaders from all communities to ensure that we and associated students are serving them in the best way possible. As your Executive Vice President, I promise to utilize my dynamic experiences in underrepresented and represented communities in order to advocate for student needs and strengthen student pride. Thank you.
As SDSU inches closer to breaking ground on the Mission Valley Satellite Campus, what are the top priorities you would like to see the administration keep in mind when it comes to the development? Isabella?
So for the Mission Valley construct, as Executive Vice President, I will be representing students. And the project was made in the vision of enhancing virtually every aspect of the SDSU student experience. So I promise to be a voice for this campus by advocating for students' needs. By working closely with Gina Jacobs, the Associate Vice President of Mission Valley Development at SDSU, I will work to hold Mission Valley accountable on their promises of no extra student fees, 10% allocation of affordable housing, and sustainability. Because the Mission Valley project is projected to be finished by 2037, I understand the importance of sustainability during this project, due to the Climate Action Plan that was introduced to SDSU in 2017. This plan states that SDSU is committed to achieving operational carbon neutrality by 2040. I'm excited to see that this project will provide more opportunities for students to attend SDSU, to achieve their goals of higher education, provide low-income housing opportunities, and to make a more environmentally sustainable community as a whole.
Great question. So the way I'm gonna, wait, can you repeat the question really quick? Sorry, before I make sure.
1 second. As SDSU inches closer to breaking ground on the Mission Valley Satellite Campus, what are the top priorities you would like to see the administration keep in mind when it comes to the development?
Great. So as Executive Vice President, my main goals with Mission Valley is to make sure that the student voice is being heard. Already the students from communities on campus have eliminated 5,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions that would be released through the Mission Valley campus, through their advocacy and communication through that. I want to continue doing that and seeing how else we can move forward by advocating as far as the environment, creating opportunities for students. There's architecture, there's sustainability, there's almost anything you can imagine while this campus is being built, and making sure that our students have those opportunities to get that real world experience that they can translate later on whenever they get real world jobs. Post-graduation, I also want to incorporate faculty involvement. I think a lot of what's going on with the Mission Valley campus is we're reaching independent contractors when a lot of our staff is capable of doing this exact thing. And I think if we target our staff, we can continue that SDSU culture. Thank you.
Just last year, investigators unveiled the largest college admission scandals in our nation's history. It was discovered that families of wealthy children were buying their kids into high-profile universities. How will you ensure that lower-income students have the same access and on-campus opportunities as their wealthier peers?
Great question. So representing all students is my biggest priority. I want to make sure that nobody feels like they're being looked over or anything like that. And the way I plan on doing so for all communities, especially, is by working with the Student Diversity Commission of Associated Students and with the existing and new centers on campus. I want to make sure that we are going out of our way. Associated student leaders are going into these spaces and listening. We've expected so much from them to come to us, but I think it's time for us to change the culture and change the narrative. And it's time for us to go to the students. Working with my Vice President of Finance, I plan to make sure that they have the appropriate amount of funds for them to do the programming and host the events that they want to do and educate other students around campus through these events. And especially right now, through our campaign, we have a QR code where we really want to listen to what students have and implement those actions into our goals right now. Thank you.
So earlier this year, the strategic plan of SDSU was established, which meant that the vision and mission for these next 5 years of SDSU was implemented. I will ensure that lower income students have that same access, but making sure that the strategic plan priority of students at our core does what it's supposed to in providing high quality educational experiences that are more accessible to not only undergraduate students, but graduate students as well as lifelong learners. Thank you.
Why did you decide to run for this position, and what makes you the most qualified person for the job? Feel free to list any relevant and past experience in student government. Isabella?
Me? Sorry. What was the question?
Why did you decide to run for this position, and what makes you the most qualified person for the job? Feel free to list any relevant past experience with student government.
Okay, great. I am the most qualified candidate for this position due to my unique experiences in organizations, both inside and outside of Associated Students. My experience in Associated Students includes serving on a committee for CLC, as well as acting as a representative for undeclared studies on the University Council. These experiences in AS taught me the inner workings, outreach, and impacts AS government can have. My involvement in organizations such as Greek Life, Science and Honor Societies, as well as cultural programs have given me a holistic view of campus life and how different communities do hold different perspectives on what it is to be campus pride. I've been serving the SDSU community, not just communities that I identify with, and I'm glad to say that I could say the same for the rest of my slate. My involvement at State has been powered by a genuine desire that all student needs are not just being heard, but are being advocated for. As your executive vice president, that desire will not be diminished.
I love SDSU. I've been involved with all different organizations and associated students since I walked onto campus. I've been on the Aztec Student Union Board, which sits under CLC, for the past 3 years. I've been on the Homecoming Executive Committee. I've been on the Green Fest Executive Committee. I've been on many I've been involved with many campus organizations, like Rotoractive SDSU, Dance Marathon Leadership Team, and a lot of other things. But I think the biggest reason why I chose to run for this position and what makes me the most qualified is because at the end of the day, what I value most is service and serving our students. The idea of service above self is not something I hold lightly, and it's something that I want to embody in what I do now, what I have done, and what I will continue to do. I think there's no better way of living a life than uplifting those around you.
Beginning with Ubaldo. At UC San Diego, the campus promotes sustainable transportation with a fee-funded U-Pass system, which grants all students access to public transportation without having to pay daily fares. Do you believe SDSU should adopt a similar model?
Great question. I know a couple of our students right now who are actively advocating for this to be a thing. And I think it is a great alternative. I think in the world that we're living in today, the environment and the impact that we're having on the environment should be our biggest priority, or at least one of our biggest priorities. And how to decrease our ecological footprint should be in our mindset at all times. And we have a trolley station on campus. We have bus stations on campus. Accessibility is there. I think what just needs to happen is for us to take that step forward and making it directly accessible for students by decreasing the prices. So working with Vice President of Finance to see how we can best work towards making this U-Pass available for all students without increasing any pricing or anything in tuition. Thank you.
Could you repeat the question, please?
At UC San Diego, the campus promotes sustainable transportation with a fee-funded U-Pass system, which grants all students access to public transportation without having to pay daily fares. Do you believe SDSU should adopt a similar model?
As Executive Vice President, working on the Mission Valley expansion will be one of my priorities, and sustainability will be one of my priorities during that expansion. And we don't know if we're going to need 5,000 parking spaces in 10 or 15 years, and sustainability is one of the main things that we have to go through moving forward. Currently, AS has been successful so far in its sustainable practices. We currently have 10 LEED buildings, 2 of which are LEED Platinum, which is the highest recognition of green buildings, the first being the Mission Bay Aquatic Center, as well as the very own Union. And in regards to expanding sustainability, As Executive Vice President, I am going to support student success to become more knowledgeable about sustainability practices and various resources available provided by the CLC Green Life Commission. I'm also going to push green initiatives like the Climate Action Resolution that recently had its first hearing in the University Council this month.
I would also like to add that in the past 20 years, Associated Students has saved $4 million by transitioning to renewable energies, and with averaging $200,000 a year. And these funds, I think, can be something that we can look into moving into this UPass and taking that financial weight off of students. So for sure, looking into alternatives through that, especially through implementing the climate action resolution that is being passed today as we speak. And Green Love is what we should be. Yeah, thank you.
Moving on, how will you act as a liaison between students and the administration in your role?
As your Chief Operating Officer, I will ensure that I'm liaison to students and administration through shared governance. I will utilize this AS value specifically when working with the Associate Vice President of Mission Valley, Gina Jacobs, on the Mission Valley Expansion Project. Through shared governance, I will hold the university to their promise of making this not only an affordable project, but a sustainable one. Thank you.
Can you repeat the question for me, please?
How will you act as a liaison between students and the administration in your role?
Yeah, great question. As one of my initiatives in the role of Executive Vice President, I want to reinforce SDSU pride, and I plan on doing so by creating a platform where for all student organizations, academic, you name it, any student organization to be able to connect, meet once a month, enforce what the student needs are, and then taking that information and taking it to administration. In addition, I want to work towards implementing a chief sustainability officer within the president's office, and hopefully them advocating on the student interest and what the students have already been working for this in the entirety of the past years. Thank you.
All right, and moving into questions from online. One of our viewers asked, oftentimes AS and student life and leadership appear to not be on the same page. As Executive Vice President, how do you plan to bridge this gap to make it easier for SDSU students to run their organizations?
Great question. In the past 2 years, I've been able to foster these relationships with a lot of advisors within student life and leadership, and I really hope to use those connections to enhance student involvement and just how student organizations collaborate, especially with associated students when it comes to funding. I think it's really important that we're taking into consideration the student interest and also taking into consideration how the behind the scenes stuff is working, and making sure that there's direct communication and making sure that the students are benefiting most from all actions. Thank you.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Oftentimes, AS and student life and leadership appear to not be on the same page. As Executive Vice President, how do you plan to bridge this gap to make it easier for SDSU students to run their organizations?
So one of the things that I'm most proud of is the various communities that our slate represents. This bridging of communities has been a vision that we have prioritized from the start, and this is a vision that we're not going to let go when we are in our AS positions. Given our combined resources, as Executive Vice President, I will ensure that different communities on campus are given the platform to collaborate on and attend events together. Thank you.
This is another question from online. One of our viewers asks, how have you previously utilized your leadership positions and platform to advocate for students of color?
Sorry. Thank you. Well, as a woman of color, the advocacy of equity over equality has always been an important notion in my life. Since my freshman year at SDSU, I've been working closely with Dr. Tanis Stark, who is the Director of Intercultural Relations here at San Diego State, and also the developer of the first Cultural Competency Certificate Program, which verifies teachers as culturally competent when dealing with classes. Since then, I've been learning from her on how to better support and advocate for communities of color, especially those that are outside of my own cultural identity as a Filipino and Guatemalan woman. I also have collaborated with many leaders of various cultural communities on this campus. Many of these leaders are also a part of my slate. Thank you.
Can you repeat the question for me, please?
How have you previously utilized your leadership positions and platform to advocate for students of color?
Thank you. That's a great question. I want to recognize that since I got to this campus, I've been on the front lines of these protests and things advocating and through action. I remember between my first couple of weeks here at SDSU, my first year, I was at the DACA protest, and then just recently the climate action protests and things, because I think listening to the student voices should be SDSU's number one priority. As far as how I've used my leadership positions, and in doing so is by spreading knowledge and educating and sharing opportunities for students to go out and be educated. So when things are being done, when events are being happened, just sharing that and making sure that people are aware that this is not only an opportunity for you to be there with your peers, but this is also an opportunity for you to educate yourself. I think one of the biggest issue is ignorance, and people don't recognize what they don't know because they don't, obviously you don't know what you don't know, and putting yourself in uncomfortable situations or in situations that you might not typically go to is where it starts, where the change begins to happen.
Touching on that, can I make a rebuttal? Touching on that, I'd just like to point out that one of my main initiatives on sustainability is such a big thing to me because sustainability doesn't affect some communities as the way it does others. So there are different groups that do have equity gaps and don't have access to certain materials or things that other people would. So the accessibility of sustainability is an important thing that we should look at.
In addition, one of my main goals as Executive Vice President is to reinforce SDSU pride through creating more opportunities for marginalized communities. This is something I take really seriously because I think through cross-collaboration and through equipping our student leaders with the resources and materials in order to take it to new heights is where it should begin.
All right, we will now move into our 1-minute closing statements, and beginning with Ubaldo.
Of course. Once again, thank you to the Daily Aztec for hosting this event and to my opponent for the spirited debate. It's time to reevaluate, redefine, and reinforce our values here at San Diego State University. I will reevaluate mental health resources and make it a top priority for all of SDSU. I will redefine the importance of sustainability within administration and within our campus by working to make SDSU carbon neutral by 2030 and the implementation of a Chief Sustainability Officer in the President's office. I will redefine SDSU pride by creating a platform that promotes cross-campus collaboration and creating more opportunities for marginalized communities. I know the challenges we face ahead are unprecedented, but myself and my team are ready for the responsibility. We are ready to serve SDSU. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. I will now welcome up the candidates for AS
I did
President.
make a closing statement.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. Here.
No worries, you're totally fine. As your next Executive Vice President, I'm dedicated to serving our campus as a whole on issues of sustainability and inclusion. I'm not here representing this or that organization. I am here to show you the vision that we can accomplish as a collective community. My vision is not perfect, but with my team and the dynamic perspectives of you, the student body, we will move SDSU into a forward direction with 2020 vision. I am Bella Martellino, and I'm running to be your next AS Executive Vice President.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you guys, and
Thank you.
we welcome up the candidates for AS President. Thank you guys both for being here today. We are going to start with 1-minute opening statements, and we can begin with Christian.
Hello, everyone. First and foremost, thank you for streaming in today. As my team previously stated, we want to acknowledge that this is a transitionary time period that we're going through as a university. This election will be essential for setting the tone for our return in the fall and our overall recovery as a student body. I'd also like to thank the Daily Aztec for hosting and the student union staff for putting this event together amongst what's happened in the past 48 hours. My name is Christian Holt, and I'm running to be your Associate Students President. Last year, I made it my goal to join associate students to add an additional perspective to the organization and redefine its leadership. Although I may still be in pursuit of the same goal, I come back to you today with another vision as a student leader serving as a member of the board of directors this year and completing my overall vision of all that defines this university. As Associate Students President, I am not here to redefine what this university needs. I am here to reaffirm its students and show them that myself and my team have a clear vision.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Plant, and I'm very excited to be here, so thank you so much for putting this together. I'd like to thank the Daily Aztec for being here. I'd like to thank my opponent for being here in good spirit. And I'd like to also acknowledge that right now, SCSU is currently at a state of confusion, and I'm here to settle some of your worries that we have as students and provide a confident plan that we can execute on moving forward. I would also like to acknowledge that today you will not see an actor, you will not see any robotic responses, you will see a genuine student who is here to help and to listen to what you have to say. And I would also like to acknowledge that I do not need an iPad or a notebook or anything of that matter to give you a sense of where I stand. Today, I'm running to be your next AS president, and I'm confident that our team will serve STSU.
Moving on to the first question. What does the history of the AS presidency mean to you? And what sets you apart as the best person to lead SDSU? Stephen?
Definitely, thank you. So the history of AS president actually means a lot to me because when I was a freshman here, I was involved in the first year leadership experience, and I had the opportunity of being mentored by the AS president at that time. So ever since I came to this university, I had the intention of one day being up here on this podium. And the reason I believe I'm most qualified and fit for this position is because I've always had students at my core. Different from my opponent, I do not work for faculty or advocate on their behalf. I have the experience necessary through already being in executive roles and president of 2 organizations on campus. I also have a perspective inside AS and outside AS because I have seen that there are things in AS that need to change. And I am confident that I can provide the most holistic leadership possible for all of our students. Thank you.
First off, let me answer the question. I think AS presidents, the history is very important. Our past presidents, Chimizi, Chris Thomas, Christian Awuka, have all been very genuine leaders who have exemplified their leadership and magnified it within AS's leadership. That's very important. It's a thing that I would like to do as president as well. But what I really want to do is push for a united campus, a united associated students, making sure that our AS leaders are reaching into their communities as well as communities outside of their own. However, there's one principle that's really important for this position, and that's shared governance. My opponent thinking that me sitting on task force or committees with faculty is serving the university is absurd. At the end of the day, shared governance means a student leader sitting on committees with faculty and administration in order to voice students' concerns. If there's no students there, then the only people making decisions would be administration.
30 seconds.
Thank you. So I'd like to bring up the task force that he is now addressing that I never addressed, so I'm not sure where that came from, but I just would like to address that the task force he is mentioning is the Presidential IFC Task Force, and all of their reports come to me. So he is on the side with faculty and bringing their recommendations to the students, and I'm on the side of the students bringing those recommendations forward for what we can do better.
The name of the task force is Student Activities and Safety Task Force. It is not the IFC Task Force. This task force covers all student organizations and looks in ways in which we can keep these student organizations on campus and in a sustainable manner. Going off of that, our reports do not go straight to the IFC president. Their reports come up to us. Secondly, again, shared governance is a principle of students sitting with faculty and administration in order to voice the concerns and opinions of students. Our AS president, as well as many IFC leaders and CPA leaders, sit on that task force.
Thank you. This is the only event happening on campus right now, as all classes are online and most buildings will be shut down by the end of today. If you were AS president today, what would you change, if anything, about how the university has dealt with the coronavirus pandemic?
To me, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that I understand that students are frustrated with the fact that we may have been one of the last universities to start closing down a lot of things, but I would also like to acknowledge and give praise to the university for allowing these resources to stay open for students that need them. And recently, with housing closing down, it is hard for me to see that because I know that a lot of students on our campus simply require and need this housing here. So if there was anything that I would change is that I would give them more time to prepare and give them a little bit of extra guidance as far as how they can move out, where they can go, and opportunities moving forward.
Students, you need an informed leader. I have been up to date on the COVID-19, and I will not sit back and I will not talk about other things that are not relevant. I will just give you your resources. Thank you.
Decisions such as blocking freshmen from bringing their cars to campus and banning electric scooters were decisions made by the university with little to no input from the student body. Do you think the administration was adequate in its efforts to court students' opinions on these issues? And if not, how would you address the issue going forward in your role should you be elected? Stephen?
Hi, thank you. So that actually aligns perfectly with one of my goals, and that is to reevaluate current university policy. And I feel like that's something that as AS leaders, we really have to take care of because we can't step into these roles and simply just allow previous policies to continue to negatively affect our students. Just because a policy has been passed does not mean that it can't be challenged. It does not mean that I can't go straight to the university and let them know that we have a lack of variation on the meal plan. There are students struggling with sophomore success. And as you mentioned, there are students every single day who struggle with the fact that they cannot have their car here. Without student input, it is completely absurd for me to believe that the university is making all the right decisions, and I want to make sure that as a student leader, I'm bringing their voice to the table every single time.
This question is truly one on the value of student input and advocacy. And I think that I really exemplified that this year with the student fees. I sat on Campus Fee Advisory Committee as a voting member, as well as I sat on the subcommittees for marketing. I made sure that I went out into organizational meeting spaces and let them know that there were open forums available and for them to attend these forums with as many questions as possible. In the end, I sat in making a final vote on the decision of these fees, and although I value that students do need these resources, I made it clear that students should not be paying for their resources. That is me showing that I am an advocate, and that is me showing that I go out and listen to students' opinions.
If elected and all goes according to plan with the city, your office will be spearheading the efforts regarding the SCSU Mission Valley project known as SCSU West. What aspects of the project will you fight for the most, and how will you bring student voices into the project? Starting with Christian.
Okay, going off of Mission Valley and student advocacy, I actually had the opportunity to actually advocate for Mission Valley through San Diego City Council and our environmental impact report, as well as on the CSU trustees. So I actually went to Long Beach CSU trustees to give the Mission Valley proposal, as well as student input on the Mission Valley proposal, as well as the climate action plan that goes along with it. And I will continue to advocate for whatever students say that they want in this project. And sustainability is one of the biggest things that need to be taken care of within this project. Other things could be for research facilities, and I would say the 10% of affordable housing. I think that 10% affordable housing and that sustainability principles are going to be the biggest things that I will be advocating for as your Associated Students President.
Thank you. So definitely this is something that is extremely relevant right now because a lot of students, quite honestly, are in the dark. A lot of students, quite honestly, don't know exactly what's happening at Mission Valley. So I want to make sure that every single student here has a voice at the table and I can bring all corners of campus together. To do that, I'm going to create a presidential advisory team committee that brings all students together from different sides of campus to truly showcase what we would like to see from Mission Valley. I would also like to be aware of the fact that we already have a satellite campus within Imperial Valley and to keep their considerations going forward as well.
Being a member of the board of directors, I actually have a pretty good relationship with the SDSU IV exec board and their student leaders. Again, I acknowledge SSUIV. However, the question was on Imperial Valley. And as far as creating focus groups for Mission Valley, our current executive vice president did very well on that. And I would continue that and encourage my executive vice president to do that. However, I think our executive vice president has done that, and I would just continue it.
I'd like to acknowledge that my opponent has good relations with the university currently, and I would also like to acknowledge and truly look at all the viewers at home that, quite honestly, I do not care if I have a good relationship with the university because that's not my job. My job is to have a good relationship with the students and advocate on their behalf.
Just to let you guys know, you are limited to 3 rebuttals, so you each have 1 left.
Thank you.
Okay, the following question is for Christian Holt. After Christian responds, Stephen, you will have a 30-second rebuttal to use if you wish to answer that.
Would that count as my last rebuttal?
No.
Okay, thank you.
So, Christian, after the temporary suspension of all interfraternity council fraternities and the death of freshman Dylan Hernandez after a fraternity event, 2 presidential task forces were established to investigate and remedy student life on campus. You sit on the Student Activities and Safety Task Force as a student at large, but are one of the only students on that board. Do you believe the makeup of these task forces is adequate to come to a conclusion that best serves student needs? And are the task forces still on track to issue final reports by this summer given the conditions of the virus?
First off, I do think that the Student Task Force does have student representation. At the end of the day, Christian Wuka, our Associate Students President, sits on that task force, who is a member of Greek Life. Leah Bed, a member of Interfraternity Council and Greek Life, sits on that board. Carly, a member of College Panhellenic Association, sits on that task force. Many of the people who are in that task force are in there for their areas of expertise. If there's a question of my relations with the university and not advocating for students, I think that people should go back and look at what I've done on this campus for student groups and many different student groups. Again, AS president needs to have good relations with all entities on campus. It does not mean that they favor them. It means that they have the relationships so that they can get things done in office. If you want a president who will get nothing done in office, you can get someone who tells you things that are not possible.
I'd like to acknowledge what he just said. Everything that I've been giving you all are tangible goals and things that I've been hearing from students because I work with students. As you mentioned in your question, yes, he is one of the few students on that task force, and whether he would like to admit it or not, their reports do come to me as the IFC president, and I am able to take recommendations from all chapters and look at the issues that we have because yes, and I will not dodge what you first said, there was a death within our community, and that is something that we are still working through. And it is something that affects us every single day. And I want to make sure that I'm able to advocate for all of our chapters who are affected and really see it from their point of view. Thank you.
All right, and this question is directed to you, Stephen, and you will be permitted a 30-second rebuttal if you choose. You served as the Interfraternity Council president during a school year that experienced heavy turbulence among the Greek community, including Hernandez's death and the temporary suspension of all of your organization's chapters. Despite the Daily Aztec's efforts to work with the IAC to bring clarity to the situation, a lack of communication has left many questions unanswered. How will you assure the campus community you will bring transparency and accountability to the role of AS president, given your organization's recent track record with this issue?
Thank you so much for addressing that. I just wanted to be extremely clear. Yes, I was the IFC president, and I went through an extreme crisis situation. I would also like to acknowledge that this is still an ongoing investigation, so any lack of communication or confusion amongst the general student body or the Daily Aztec is simply from a professional perspective and from what my advisors told me I could say. I legally had an obligation to not respond to any media, and that is still the case to this point right now. So I just wanted to address that. I've never dodged anything that happened. I have acknowledged that it happened, and I have been supporting our community through this. At the end of the day, I'm the IFC president. I am the governing council, and I could put policies in place, and I could bring as many preventative measures as possible. But at the end of the day, I am not the chapter president individually of each chapter, and I am not sure what is going on behind closed doors, and I can only act in a proactive and reactive fashion to what's happening on our campus.
Just one quick side note, being told that it would have been prohibited for you to speak to media would have been kind of nice, either from you or somebody else to reach out to us if you couldn't say anything, because that was clouded in a lot of our communication.
Thank you. I apologize for that, but they told me not to respond at all. I was simply just following direction.
Do you have a rebuttal if you choose?
I think you heard a lot of I statements. There's a lot of I statements, and I don't know if that shows leadership that is focused on oneself or one thing. However, I will say this, that everyone out there listening to this, you know that you've had conversations with me. You can ask around about Christian Holt, and people have had conversations with me from all sorts of communities and know that I have advocated for them. And you can, again, go to my actions and see that I've advocated for them. One thing that wasn't mentioned about the task force was the Good Samaritan policy. And the Good Samaritan policy allows student organizations to, if there's something that has to do with alcohol or drugs, that a student needs transportation, anyone there can speak up and get that person the right help without having fear of any repercussions.
Okay, this would be using your last rebuttal.
Yes. I do not want to allow my opponent the opportunity to take the Good Samaritan policy and add that to something that he accomplished, because that is something that has been in the works within IFC for many years. Our past IFC president, Jacob Mahoney, really put that in motion. So I would just like to acknowledge that he or the task force was not what pushed that through. That has been years of hard work, things that we have all been working on and things that we have been wanting to change, as well as now what I'm working on is a social calendaring system to make sure that fraternities can be more safe and have things in place if things ever do go wrong, unfortunately. Thank you.
I think this back and forth and what's happening in the task force, what's happening in IFC is honestly like, it's not showing transparency, because at the end of the day, social calendaring is being worked on within the task force as well, because IFC is working on it. Everything, again, Leah Bed is an IFC leader, so there are IFC leaders within the task force. And at the end of the day, the student voice within the task force has a decision in what gets put out.
Before we move on, both candidates are out of rebuttals.
Thank you.
As the head of the student body, you are the main executive voice on how students feel and what they want to see from AS and where they want their money to go. How will you prioritize funding, and specifically, what areas of student life do you think deserve the most financial support? We'll start with Christian.
Can you repeat the question, please?
As the head of the student body, you are the main executive voice on how students feel and what they want to see from AS and where they want their money to go. How will you prioritize funding, and specifically, what areas of student life do you think deserve the most financial support?
Okay. With this, I will have to work with my Vice President of Financial Affairs in order to look at our budget and see where our revenue streams are coming from, seeing how this coronavirus is going to affect our budget, and seeing where we are going to be able to allocate those funds. A lot of the allocation comes through AS's unallocated budget as well as our other budgets. However, outside of associated students, us as execs have the opportunity to sit on student success fee, and that's where we can approve academic related projects that students are asking for. One student group that was asking for things was the College of Engineering last year. And so as a voting member within the student success fee, I made sure that their voices were heard. Communities of color were advocating for projects, and so I made sure that their voices were heard.
Thank you. So to actually answer your question, I will not over-prioritize any area of campus because no community should be over-prioritized. What needs to be a priority is ensuring that all students are being heard and they are requesting the funding, and I can go to them and say, hey, how can I help? This is what we have from AS. How can I help your organization, and what do you feel like is most suited for you? Because I can't guess on each community and what they need, but what I can do is include them in the conversation. If we don't include people in the conversation, then they are never going to feel like their voice is being heard. So as I mentioned previously, with a presidential advisory committee, I will have people from every corner of campus to advocate on behalf of them and give them the resources that they need at that time. Because every single year, as we mentioned, with the coronavirus, things change and funding will need to go to different places. So I want to give them a realistic and timely response to exactly what they need at that time.
And we have decided to add 2 more rebuttals for each candidate. We have a handful of questions left, so if you would like to use those, you have 2 more each.
Perfect.
So moving on to the next question. Some buildings on campus are old and decayed, while others, such as the engineering building, are brand new. The botched repair job in the Professional Studies and Fine Arts building may be remedied, but the space is still barely used. With SDSU looking to expand projects into other areas of San Diego, how will you advocate for fixing infrastructural issues on the campus we already have? Starting with Stephen.
Definitely. So I actually think that you said it perfectly. We need to make sure that our priorities are straight on our campus first. I understand that we want to expand, and I completely acknowledge why that is a strategic move for the university. But at the end of the day, we are neglecting our student people here right now. We are neglecting their voice, and we are neglecting their experience here at SDSU because they are in unsafe or dirty or unconstructed buildings. Those are things that all need to be addressed, and I want to include all student perspectives when doing that. Yes, we can expand, and I am excited for that process, but at the same time, we need to take care of our home.
Luckily, I've had the opportunity with running with the current PSFA rep, Crystal Sanchez, and she has informed me on the building and other infrastructure on campus that needs improvement. As your AS president, I will advocate for, of course, improving things at home. But even further than that, I think my main focus is students' resources and making sure that students are not paying for those resources. You know, students are going to need mental health resources. Students are going to need basic needs. And my vice presidents are ready to serve students as well as myself.
If you had only one thing to get done during your time as president, what specifically would it be? Please list out the details of how you would achieve this. Christian.
Thank you. Okay, so if I had one thing to do as AS president, let's go into our endowment. Okay, so if I had one thing to do as your AS president, it would be continuing the ARC endowment plan. And with the ARC endowment plan, I'll be working with our vice president of university relations and development, and basically working with her to increase the funding sources that come into our university to provide scholarship to offset the financial burden that's put on students from student fee increases. So expanding on the ARC endowment plan, as well as bringing in other scholarships through this university. Because at the end of the day, you know, academics, we're told that we're students, academics. However, if you do not have the resources to excel and succeed as a student, then you will not be able to graduate within 4 years. And you will be going more into debt when you're going into the workforce later on in life.
Thank you. So without having to scroll through my iPad and find a reason or one thing that I want to accomplish for this position, the number one thing that I want to accomplish in this position is to reinforce that students come first. At the end of the day, that is an all-encompassing perspective that no matter what we want to accomplish, the students have to come first. If that is the only thing that I accomplish this year and I make sure that the students are heard and their perspective comes first and they know that I am a student as well, then I will be happy. That is all encompassing. That includes the ARC endowment plan. If students don't come first, why is that a process that's continuing right now? I want to support it. But at the same time, students must come first. So if we're talking about one thing that I want to make sure that I accomplish in my position, it is reinforcing that students will always come first.
I think that's easy to say, students come first, or throw out any other buzzwords. However, if you look at the history of what I've done on this campus, being a community assistant in the residence halls for 3 years, working with graduate students, transfer students, international students, sophomores, etc., I have been on the ground level with students, and I have seen what their needs are, and I've been advocating for them in my position as a board of director currently. I have created a political organization to educate minority communities on politics called the Collegiate Black Caucus, which I'm the president of. I'm the co-director of the Tijuana Home Build, which brings students from all different communities together for one common goal, to build a home for a family in need.
Moving into questions from our online viewers. SDSU is number 12 among the top 25 best colleges in the country for LGBTQ students. What will you do during your presidency to ensure that LGBTQIA+ students are continuously supported and protected? And what have you done already in your previous roles? Starting with Stephen.
Thank you. So as AS president, As I mentioned previously, this Presidential Advisory Committee is going to be a main focus of mine to bring students from all sides of campus. So the LGBTQ plus community will be heard, and I also want to make it so that people understand that there is a resource center here for them. And a lot of people aren't acknowledging that, and a lot of people don't know that. So I want to be able to give their resource center more accessibility and more funding for programs and outreach that they would like to do. As far as my previous goals, as far as my previous positions, I've always made sure to include an inclusive environment with every position that I've held.
The way that I've already done this is by using inclusive language when in council meetings, not only using inclusive language, but using pronouns. Also going into the Pride Center, going to events when I can. I've been to talent shows and other educational events. And I would say the biggest part about being an ally is being there, not just hosting some committee for people to come and speak, but actually showing you that you care, showing people that you care, and showing up, hearing things, and allowing them to see that their voice is heard.
Rebuttal.
Thank you. So I'd like to acknowledge what he said, basically saying that a committee is not the answer, but I actually disagree, because I feel like just having familiarity and just showing up to something does not show that you truly care about that community and you're going to advocate for them. Just because you showed up to a talent show, or just because you may know someone within that community, does not mean you're actually going to take action and put something in place. This Presidential Advisory Team Committee is going to be able to actually bring people out from every part of the community and have their voice be heard. And that is a tangible goal that I will accomplish.
Moving on. What is your experience with environmental justice, and how do you plan to support students on this front in the upcoming year? Why do you think these kinds of initiatives are important? Christian.
Environmental injustice is a huge issue, and I think that the way to combat this is by educating our community on it, pushing sustainable principles, and educating people on how being sustainable affects underrepresented communities. A lot of times, people will use plastic water bottles or things of that nature, and they don't know the impact that it actually has. They don't know that sometimes oftentimes that plastic washes up on the shore of third world countries, or even washes up on the shore of our beaches. They don't know that refinery plants are in communities of color, and that they are disproportionately affected by the fumes coming from those refineries, and that it affects their lungs, and they get early onset lung cancer, etc. It's just educating our campus community on the impact of environmental policy.
Thank you. So I believe what my opponent is trying to explain is environmental racism, and that basically is students of color or whichever minority group that they identify with are placed in areas that are of lower socioeconomic status, and they are, more exposed to a lot of these things like garbage dumps and things like that. So I will like to agree with my opponent as far as educational pieces that need to be implemented, but I would also like to commend the fact that SCSU is the only university that is about to have 2 double LEED platinum facilities in the world. And that is a huge accomplishment with our new art coming in, and I just wanted to acknowledge what we are already doing.
Those would be on-campus facilities. Our Mission Bay Aquatic Center is LEED Platinum. Thank you.
All right, and to all of our online viewers, we're still getting questions, but we are just a few minutes away from our time limit, so we're going to move into 1-minute closing arguments, and we can start with Christian.
I'd like to thank the Daily Aztec for hosting this today, as well as the union staff for putting it on. Moving into the following months, there are many unknowns on this campus. Although our classes have moved to online, I want to assure students that we are still here. The term of Associate Students President starts this semester. Actions need to be taken now. And through my experience in student advocacy, my involvement in the Student Activity and Safety Presidential Task Force, enacting preventative measures that will allow those organizations to be sustained, giving my perspective at the San Diego City Council meetings, at the CSU trustees, sitting on the board of directors and advocating for students, I want you all to know that my 2020 vision has dynamic perspectives And those perspectives come from all of your communities, not just one alone. And so come with me and let's move in this forward direction. And let me serve as your Associate Students President. Thank you.
Thank you so much for an amazing debate. I really appreciated it. Thank you to my opponent for being here, and thank you to the Daily Aztec and union staff for putting this event together. You know, I think what's really important is that it is time for us to reevaluate, redefine, and reinforce what our students actually need most. Those are the three buzzwords that you've heard from each member of our team, and that is because those are things that can actually put into action what needs to be done for the students. And to all of you at home, I cannot promise you as AS president that I will always be on the side of the university or I will always be up on the podium in a rehearsed fashion. But what I can promise you as Associated Students President is behind this suit, you will always have a friend, you will always have an ally, you will always have a fighter, and you will always have a fellow student. And I'm confident that through my team and everything that we've been able to do thus far, we are going to be able to serve SDSU.
Last year, I was sought out to redefine AS's SDSU leadership. I was a member outside of Associated Students, and I wanted to come in and provide my extra perspective to this organization. As a board director, I have already done that, and I will continue to do that. However, again, the goal of this year is not to redefine. It's to reaffirm students that their leaders have the knowledge and the performance and advocacy to be AS president, to be executive vice president, etc., and to represent students.
Thank you.
So I think what he is trying to explain is to reevaluate, redefine, and reinforce, as he just mentioned. So those are the goals that we have, and that's exactly how we're going to be able to accommodate for all students. And thank you all so much for being here and listening. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that you saw a sense of normalcy with what's happening. And to all those at home, I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much to both of you for being here and for the spirited debate. That brings the conclusion of our AS debates for this year. To everybody watching online at home, please remember to vote next week between March 23rd and March 26th online. And until next time, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.